I don't think I'll ever forget the sound the clock made in that lawyer's office. A soft, steady tick, 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 like it was counting down the last breaths of a 30-year marriage. The room felt too bright, cold, unfeeling, a place where hearts came to be broken officially, on paper. Welcome to my channel, I'm Mama Jo, and before I tell you what happened next, comment where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my stories travel, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new chapter. I sat at the polished wooden table, hands folded tightly in my lap. My palms were damp, my heartbeat high in my throat. Across from me sat the lawyer, young, well-dressed, professional. Her eyes darted between us with the quiet discomfort of someone who hates her job on days like this. Beside me sat the man I once thought I would grow old with, my husband. His cologne smelled different today, sharper, like something expensive he'd bought to impress someone else. His suit looked newer, too. Clean, crisp, too crisp for a man about to tear a life apart. He tapped the table twice, impatient, then without looking at me, without clearing his throat, without even softening his expression, he slid a thick folder across the table. The sound it made, a firm shift against the wood, cut straight into me. My breath caught. The folder stopped inches from my hands. I stared at it. "Go on," he said, leaning back casually in his chair. "Pick it up." The lawyer shifted slightly as if bracing herself. I swallowed and forced my fingers to move, though they trembled so badly I feared the folder would slip from my grasp. I opened it slowly, the paper cool and stiff beneath my fingertips. The heading alone made my stomach twist. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My throat tightened. He smirked. "It's not complicated," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "I already had everything filled out. All that's missing is your signature." The lawyer's eyes flickered toward me again. Not pity, just discomfort, like she wished she could disappear. I managed to lift my gaze to meet his. "After 30 years, I whispered. He shrugged. 32. "But who's counting? It's over. It's been over for a long time." My breath shook. He noticed and smiled. "You shouldn't look so surprised," he continued lightly. "You knew this was coming. You're not stupid, just slow." His mouth curled into a cruel half-smile. "Age does that?" The words hit like stones thrown at a window pane. Quiet, sharp, cracking places inside me I didn't know were fragile. He chuckled softly under his breath, as if amused that I still reacted at all. "You're old, you're tired, and let's be honest. You've been dead weight for years," he said, voice cool as marble. "It's time you let go and stop dragging me down." The lawyer inhaled sharply. She didn't speak, couldn't, but her discomfort tightened the air between us. My fingers trembled in my lap. Dead weight, old, worthless. Words he'd spoken before, but never like this. Never with such finality, never in front of someone else. He leaned forward suddenly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Oh, and everything stays with me," he said, tapping the papers lightly. "The house, the accounts, the business. All of it. You'll leave with nothing, which, let's be honest, is fitting considering how much you contributed." A soft ringing filled my ears. The lawyer opened her mouth, closed it again, shifted uncomfortably. He didn't notice, or didn't care. He flicked through the pages casually, like flipping through a magazine. "I mean, look at you," he laughed quietly. "What could you possibly do with assets anyway? You're past your prime, way past." He pushed the pen toward me. "So sign. Don't make a scene. Let's end this with dignity." Dignity. He said it as if he hadn't already stripped mine away piece by piece. I sat there frozen, my breath shallow, fingers digging crescent moons into my palms. I willed myself not to cry, not here, not in front of him, not where he could turn my tears into a joke he told someone else later. He watched me, almost eagerly, waiting for the moment I broke, but I didn't. My body trembled, my throat burned, but I didn't break. He sighed dramatically when I didn't immediately reach for the pen. "Oh, for heaven's sake," he muttered, "don't make this difficult. You've always been emotional. That's why I had to take control of things. That's why I built everything." He leaned back, pride swelling in his chest. "That's why everything belongs to me." The lawyer looked down at the table, still silent, still uncomfortable. The clock ticked softly in the background. Tick, 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 marking the final minutes of the life I'd lived with this man. I forced myself to look back at the documents. Pages and pages of neat legal language filled my vision, words meant to erase 32 years. Erase me. Erase the sacrifices I'd made. Erase the love I once poured into a man now sitting 3 feet away, smirking like a victor before the battle even started. My hand hovered above the papers, trembling. He sighed again. "There we go," he said with satisfaction. "Now be a good girl," and a glint of something caught my eye. A tab. A small faded tab sticking out from the very back of the folder. Not part of the divorce papers. This one was older, yellowed, edges worn, label handwritten. I frowned, leaned forward. The words on the tab stopped my heart. "Will do not open without client." A chill swept through me, so sudden it made me inhale sharply. My father's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. He kept talking, rambling, bragging, making little jokes, but his voice sounded far away now, muffled like someone speaking from underwater. My fingers drifted toward the tab, brushing lightly against the paper. It felt different from the divorce documents. Heavier, more fragile, more important. Why was it here? Why had the lawyer included it? Why had my husband not noticed? As my fingertips pressed against that faded tab, something stirred in my chest. Not hope. Not yet. But something, a shift, a question, a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. I lifted my eyes slowly. He was still smirking, still confident, still certain he'd already won. He had no idea what sat inside this folder, no idea what I was touching, no idea what my father had left behind. And as my thumb dragged along the edge of that mysterious tab, my trembling finally stopped. Not because the pain vanished, but because something else, something stronger, had taken its place. I slid the tab forward just enough to see the first line beneath it. My breath caught, my heart slammed, and in that instant everything inside me shifted. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore, because whatever this document was, whatever my father had hidden behind that tab, it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me, and it was going to change everything. There was a time, long before the cold courtroom chairs and the sting of his voice calling me worthless, when loving him felt like the easiest thing in the world. Our beginning wasn't grand or glamorous. It was small, gentle, and full of the kind of hope only 2 young people with nothing but dreams can carry without breaking. We met at a community picnic. I was 19, carrying a tray of homemade biscuits my father bragged about all afternoon. When he was 21, standing with his hands in his pockets, laughing too loudly at something his friends said. I remember glancing at him and thinking he looked like the kind of boy who had a storm inside him. Big ambitions disguised beneath a warm smile. He asked if he could help me set the tray down. I told him I could manage. He helped anyway. He made me laugh that day. Really laugh, deep from the belly, the kind of laugh that makes your shoulders relax and your heart feel too big for your chest. By sunset, we were sitting on the tailgate of his old pickup, sharing biscuits and stories about who we were and who we wanted to become. "I want to build something," he said, looking up at the sky as if it held the blueprint to his future. "Something big, something people remember." I smiled at him, believing every word. He looked at me then, eyes soft, hopeful. "And I want someone by my side who believes I can." I told him I did, and for a long time I did. We married young, in a small ceremony in my father's backyard. My father cried when he walked me down the aisle, big tears he tried to hide with gruff sniffles. He liked my husband, thought he was ambitious, hard-working, but I know now he also saw the shadows in him long before I did. Our first home was a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The floorboards creaked, the windows stuck in winter, and you could hear the machines rumbling beneath us until midnight. But we were happy, or at least I was. He'd come home tired from his job at the hardware store, and I'd have a warm plate waiting for him. He'd kiss my forehead, thank me, pull me close. We'd fall asleep tangled in each other's arms, smelling faintly of detergent and cheap candles. In those days, love was enough, or I believed it was. He wanted to go back to school, to study business. I worked 2 jobs, so he could. Long shifts at the diner in the mornings, then cleaning offices in the evenings. Some nights, I'd come home with aching feet and swollen hands, but I'd smile and ask him about his classes. He would talk for hours, pacing the living room with excitement, explaining things I didn't fully understand but loved hearing him speak about. "You're going to change the world," I'd say, rubbing his shoulders when he studied too long. "You're the only one who sees it," he'd reply softly. "But love given without balance becomes a weight. And eventually, I was the only one lifting. His first success changed everything. He got a job at a firm downtown, wearing suits instead of work boots. Suddenly, he was surrounded by people who praised him, admired him, told him he had a bright future. I was proud, truly proud. But the more he rose, the less he came home. Dinners got cold, birthdays were missed, anniversaries forgotten. When I asked if something was wrong, he would laugh, a laugh sharp enough to cut. "You worry too much," he'd say. "You're too sensitive. Don't start drama," things he used to find cute. My softness, my loyalty, my eagerness to talk about our day became things he mocked. He made jokes about my clothes, jokes about my cooking, jokes about my weight, jokes about my age once he began earning more. He'd say them with a smile, pat my hand, and tell me to lighten up. But a joke that only hurts one person isn't a joke at all. I learned to stay quiet, to shrink, to make myself small around the man I once thought would love me loudly forever. He started staying out late, said it was networking, said these were the sacrifices success demanded. I smelled perfume on his shirts once, floral, unfamiliar, young. He said I was imagining things, said I was insecure, said I should trust him more. And I did, because I didn't want to lose him, because I believed love meant holding on, even when your hands began to bleed. A year before my father passed, he called me into his room. He was thinner then, quieter, his voice softer around the edges. He took my hand in his grip surprisingly firm for a man battling illness. "Baby," he whispered, "always protect yourself." I laughed a little, wiping his forehead. "Daddy, what do you mean?" He squeezed my fingers. "People change," he said, eyes searching mine. "Ambition can turn into pride. Pride can turn into cruelty. And cruelty can disguise itself in the face you once trusted most." My throat tightened. He reached slowly toward his bedside drawer and pulled out a document, one I recognized in shape but not in meaning at the time. "I need you to sign something," he murmured. "Not because I want to doubt your husband, but because you must never doubt your own future." I didn't want to sign it. I argued. I cried. I told him it felt wrong, like preparing for a betrayal that might never come. He held my face in his frail hands. "If the day ever comes when someone tries to make you feel worthless," he whispered, "you'll have something stronger than their words." I signed it through tears, not understanding its power, not knowing how much wisdom sat behind his trembling voice. I had forgotten about that moment for years, until today, when I saw that tab, that handwriting, that will. The lawyer's office snapped back into focus, his laughter, sharp and triumphant, cutting through the memory. I blinked. The room felt colder. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, smirk wide. The rest of that meeting blurred into something dull and distant, like watching a storm roll through a window while you're trapped inside. I sat there, stiff as cold stone, the folder heavy on my lap, the edges digging into my palms. I didn't speak again. I couldn't. My voice lived somewhere low in my chest, beneath the humiliation, beneath the ache, beneath the exhaustion that 32 years of loyalty had carved into my bones. My husband, on the other hand, seemed energized by the moment, almost gleeful. He talked over the lawyer, interrupted her explanations, filled every quiet gap with little jokes only he found funny. "I mean, be realistic," he drawled at one point. "She's not adaptable. Change confuses her. She's not built for independence." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in her seat but didn't correct him. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was used to men like him, loud, arrogant, puffed up with their own narratives, men who assumed the world belonged to them so thoroughly that any contradiction felt like an insult. I looked at him then. Really looked. The sharp lines of his jaw, the expensive suit straining slightly at the buttons, the smug twist at the corner of his mouth. This was not the young man I once knew. Not the man who held me on cold nights. Not the man who swore I was the only good thing in his life. That man died long ago, slowly, quietly, without ceremony. This one was different. This one sat beside me with a grin, planning how to strip me of everything I helped him build. Eventually, the meeting ended. The lawyer slid copies of the documents toward me, her hand gentle, her eyes heavy with something she couldn't say aloud. Pity, maybe, or awareness, or guilt. "Mrs. Thompson," she whispered, "you can review these at home. You don't need to sign today." My husband scoffed loudly. She might as well. There's no point dragging this out. But I closed the folder gently and stood. I'll review them, I said softly. Alone. He rolled his eyes but didn't argue. Outside, his new car, a sleek black sedan, flashed in the sun. The kind of car he used to say was too expensive, unnecessary, impractical, until he got a new audience to admire him. Speaking of her, she leaned against the passenger door, scrolling on her phone, wearing a dress too short for the winter air, and a jacket that looked like it belonged in a boutique I couldn't afford. When she saw us, she straightened, eyes sliding over me like I was an expired food item in a grocery store. There you are, she said, tossing her hair. My husband's chest puffed. He reached for her hand without hesitation right in front of me. You ready, baby? He asked. She smirked and kissed his cheek, loudly. Then she looked at me and said, Oh, hi, you're still here. Still here. Like mold. Like dust. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My husband chuckled and opened the car door for her. Let's get lunch. I know you're starving. As they walked away, she called out behind her, loud enough for me and everyone in the parking lot to hear, Make sure you sign those papers. We've got plans. Laughter followed, their laughter sharp as glass. I turned away. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the documents. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove home in silence, the world outside my windshield blurring into soft shapes and muted colors. The folder sat beside me on the passenger seat, its weight reminding me of everything I was about to lose, or everything he thought I was about to lose. When I reached the house, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car with the engine off, my breath fogging the windshield. 32 years. 32 years of cooking meals he didn't always come home to eat. 32 years of washing clothes he rarely thanked me for cleaning. 32 years of holding the family together while he chased success. 32 years of shrinking so he could shine. And now, I was disposable. My fingers finally closed around the folder again, and I forced myself to walk inside. The house felt colder than usual. Too quiet. Too still. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs. I placed the folder on the dining table and lowered myself into a chair slowly, like my bones were too heavy for my body. Minutes passed, or hours, I couldn't tell. Eventually, curiosity, or maybe desperation, pushed me to open the folder again. The front pages were the same. Legal jargon, terms of division, his signature in bold strokes. Then my phone buzzed. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. A message from him. Don't take too long. I need the house cleared in a month. My stomach twisted. Before I could process that, another message came in. A screenshot this time. A text exchange between him and the mistress. She's signing today. Good. The house will look so much better once she's gone. Don't worry, baby. I built everything. It's all mine anyway. She should be grateful we're not putting her out sooner. Worthless. The word hit me like a fist. Worthless. 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 I didn't realize I was crying until a tear fell onto the page, smudging a printed name. I wiped it quickly, almost frantically, terrified of ruining something. Terrified of ruining anything at all, as if this paper was the last fragile piece of control I had left. My hands trembled as I set the phone aside. I closed my eyes, breathed, slowly, deeply. Then I reached into the folder again, toward the back, toward the faded tab, toward my father's handwriting. Will do not open without client. My pulse jumped. I pulled the document out carefully, my breath shallow, my fingers unsteady. This paper was older, thicker, softer at the edges. The ink slightly faded. The seal at the top made my heart stop. My father's estate, my father's final instructions, a will I didn't remember, a directive I never knew was for me. I lifted the first page and the room shifted around me, the walls pulling closer, the silence deepening. My father's familiar handwriting spread across the page, slow, neat strokes, weighty words, a voice speaking across years, across grief, across time. I hadn't meant to read more than the first line, but the moment I did, everything inside me began to change, and the humiliation that had crushed me just hours earlier, the cruelty, the laughter, the insults, the betrayal, began to crumble under the weight of something stronger, truth and power. The kind of power my husband wouldn't see coming. I stared at the page until the words blurred, not from tears this time, from realization. Something was inside this will that would change everything. He thought he had won. He thought I would crumble. He didn't know my father, he didn't know what my father protected, and he didn't know I wasn't worthless, not even close, and tomorrow he would find out. The house was silent when I finally carried the old wooden box into the living room. It had been sitting on the top shelf of my bedroom closet for years, so long that a thin layer of dust coated its lid like a veil, soft and gray. My father's handwriting curled across the top in faded black ink. For my daughter. Open only when needed. I had never wanted to need it. My hands trembled as I set it gently on the dining table. The box felt heavier than it looked, like it carried the weight of decades, of warnings I never fully understood, of love I hadn't realized was still protecting me. Outside, the world was dimming, evening shadows stretching long across the walls. The air smelled faintly of pine from the candle I had lit hours ago, without thinking. Everything felt still. Too still. I sat, fingers lingering on the carved edges, tracing the grooves like a child remembering her father's steady hands, guiding hers through the motions. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me feared what was inside, feared that hope itself might hurt after everything I had endured. But then I remembered the humiliation in that office, the laughter, the smirk, the word worthless falling from the lips of the man I once would have given my life for. And with a shaky breath, I lifted the lid. Inside, everything was where my father left it. Neat, orderly, intentional. He was always that way. Even his handwriting seemed to believe in structure and meaning. The first item was an envelope sealed with brittle wax. I slid it aside carefully, not ready for words just yet. Beneath it lay folders, older than I remembered. Their edges yellowed, corners slightly curled from years of waiting. I pulled the first one toward me. My breath caught. The prenuptial agreement, the original. Airtight, signed, stamped, witnessed, legally binding. I traced my younger signature with trembling fingers, a signature written by a hopeful woman who believed in forever more than she believed in her own protection. My father's signature sat beneath it, strong, decisive, steady. I swallowed hard, blinking back a rush of emotion. He had saved me long before I knew I needed saving. I set the prenup aside, my heartbeat thudding harder now, my breath uneven. I reached into the box again and lifted the second folder, thicker, heavier. The seal on the front bore my father's name, last will and testament. Cold rippled through me. I opened it slowly, unfolding the crisp pages until the text stared back at me, firm, unwavering, like my father's voice echoing across time. As I read, my hand flew to my mouth. My father had not been a wealthy man in the flashy sense. No giant houses, no luxury cars, no extravagant vacations, but he was a man of land, of investments, of hard-earned savings that grew quietly over decades. And every line of the will said the same thing. All of it, everything, was mine. Fully, solely, without contest. Land, bonds, stocks, accounts, property deeds, investment shares, inheritance tied to his family estate. Everything. He left me everything. My husband. The man who marched into that lawyer's office bragging about assets he thought he owned, the man who claimed the house, the land, and my father's legacy, had zero legal claim to any of it, none. Not one penny. He had been planning to steal from me, not knowing that everything he lusted after was never his. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. Warmth filled my chest. Not joy exactly, but recognition. Recognition of something I had forgotten. I was never powerless. Not with my father behind me, not with the truth written in ink older than my marriage. I pressed the back of my hand to my lips, trying to steady the trembling in my chest. Tears welled in my eyes but didn't fall. There was no sorrow in them, only revelation, only strength. I closed the will gently and exhaled shakily, but as I moved to place it back inside the box, something else slipped loose. A smaller sheet tucked behind the final page, half hidden, folded twice. My brow furrowed. I didn't recognize it. My name was written along the top, but the date beneath it made my breath hitch. It was signed years after the prenup, years after the wedding, closer to when my father's health began to decline. With trembling hands, I unfolded it cautiously. The paper was thick, high-quality parchment, the kind used for documents that held weight. The embossed seal shimmered faintly under the dining room light. I read the first line and froze. My heart stuttered. My breath lodged in my throat, because this wasn't just a will, not just an extension of his estate. It was a legal transfer, a controlling interest, a majority share, a decision my father must have made quietly, deliberately, with the same foresight that led him to create the prenup. I read the line again, my voice trembling silently across the empty room. In the event of my passing, 51% of Thompson Enterprises shall be transferred to my daughter. Thompson Enterprises, my husband's company, his pride, his identity, his life's work. My father had invested early, quietly, back when the company was nothing more than an idea sketched on a napkin. A small investment then, that grew into a majority stake. A stake my husband never knew my father still held. A stake that now belonged, legally, permanently, to me. My hands shook violently now, not from fear, but from the magnitude of it all. He had spent months belittling me, years undermining me, hours mocking me in that office, calling me worthless. All while the will sitting in my hands said, I owned him. I owned his company. I owned everything he tried to use to destroy me. My breath came in a broken exhale as the truth settled into my bones. This wasn't just protection. This was power, a power he would never see coming. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table, startling me. I wiped my eyes and picked it up. My lawyer's name filled the screen. Hello? My voice cracked. Mrs. Thompson, she said urgently, I need you in my office first thing in the morning. My pulse quickened. Why? There's been a development, something your father arranged, something your husband doesn't know we've discovered. I swallowed hard, clutching the document to my chest. Yes, I whispered. I know. A brief silence, then gently, come early. This changes everything. The call ended. I set the phone down, heart pounding, the edges of the will digging into my palms. I looked toward the window, at the darkening sky, at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized anymore. Not because she was broken, but because she was becoming something else, someone with power, someone with clarity, someone her husband should never have underestimated. I folded the document back into the box with a care that bordered on reverence. Tomorrow, he would learn the truth. He thought taking the house would crush me. He thought stealing my future would end me. He thought humiliating me would silence me. He had no idea. I was the majority owner of his entire world, and the only thing left now was to let him walk confidently into his own downfall, quietly, powerfully, just as my father intended. The next morning, the world felt strangely still, as if even the air knew something was shifting. I woke before dawn, long before my alarm, with the box still sitting open on the dining table, like a guardian watching over me. For a few moments, I just sat at the edge of my bed, breathing slowly, letting my body adjust to the weight of everything I learned the night before. Then I rose, showered, dressed carefully, and picked up the documents, my own quiet armor. When I arrived at my lawyer's office, she was already standing at the doorway waiting for me. Her expression was tight, not anxious, but brimming with a kind of electric, restrained excitement. The moment she saw the second document I was holding, she gestured me inside quickly, shutting the office door behind us. Mrs. Thompson, she said softly, almost reverently, is that what I think it is? My throat tightened. I handed her the document. She took it with both hands, as though it were a newborn child. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and then she sat down abruptly. My God, she breathed. Your father protected you beyond anything I've ever seen. She looked up at me, her voice trembling with professional disbelief. This prenup alone is one of the strongest I've reviewed in my entire career. But this, she tapped the ownership transfer, this is monumental. I sat slowly in the chair across from her. She gestured at the two documents, prenup and will, laid out together on her desk like a perfectly assembled puzzle. Your husband, she said carefully, has absolutely no legal claim to anything your father left you. Not the land, not the stocks, not the house, nothing. I nodded, but my heart still fluttered, still unsure it could believe something so powerful. And this, she continued, pointing to the ownership document, this means you inherited majority control of Thompson Enterprises long before your husband even imagined leaving you. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He's been bragging about assets and a company he doesn't even legally own. My breath caught. He thought I was worthless, I whispered. The lawyer shook her head firmly. He underestimated the wrong woman. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the warmth of pride settle in my chest. Not arrogance, not revenge. Just the steady recognition that I was not as small as he made me believe. The lawyer took a deep breath and straightened the documents. "Here's what we do," she said, all business now. "We stay quiet, completely silent." I blinked. Silent. Yes. Your silence is your greatest weapon right now. What about his messages? She smiled faintly. Let him rant, let him insult you, let him think he's winning. The more confident he grows, the harder the fall. I exhaled slowly. The plan felt right, steady. The lawyer opened her laptop and began typing quickly. "These are the filings for the court. We will present everything on the day. No warnings, no hints, no clues. He will walk into that courtroom with the arrogance of a man who believes everything belongs to him." She glanced at me knowingly. "And he will walk out with nothing." A soft warmth spread through my chest, less like triumph and more like relief. The kind of relief that comes when truth finally rises after being buried for too long. Back home, my phone buzzed constantly. He had been messaging all morning. "I hope you're packing. Don't drag this out. Remember, you're leaving with nothing. You should thank me for not kicking you out sooner. I'm being generous." And finally, "Once this is done, maybe you'll actually figure out how useless you are without me." I stared at the messages, feeling nothing. No anger, no hurt, no dread, just distance, like reading the words of a stranger pretending he still held power over me. I locked my phone without responding. Silence was easier than I thought, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. A notification popped up, an Instagram tag. I frowned. The mistress, a video. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. She sat on a couch, makeup pristine, lips glossed, wearing a smug smile that tightened something in my stomach. "Hey everyone," she chirped. "So just a quick life update." I didn't breathe. She leaned forward conspiratorially. "We're about to move into a huge house. You won't believe how amazing it is. The view? Iconic. The kitchen? Massive. Everything is ours, finally." She winked at the camera. "And the best part? The old woman living there is leaving soon. Some people just don't know when their time is up." I felt the words more than heard them. Her smile sharpened. "But don't worry, babe," she added coyly, turning the camera toward my husband, who waved awkwardly. "We're building a new future, a better one, without baggage." Then she blew a kiss. I watched the video twice, once in disbelief, once in clarity. Then I blocked her, permanently. No commentary, no message, no reaction, just silence. Because silence is its own declaration. Over the next week, I gathered everything my lawyer requested: receipts, titles, tax papers, investment documents, old letters from my father, stock certificates, bank statements. I created neat folders, labeled each carefully, checked dates twice. For the first time in a long while, I felt purposeful. Every piece of paper reminded me I was not a background character in a story he wrote. I had history. I had value. I had protection. One evening, after hours of sorting documents, I paused and placed my palm on the last will folder. The room was quiet, warm, safe. I whispered softly, "Daddy, thank you." Not a dramatic whisper, not a tear-filled one, just warm, grateful, stable, a thank you that carried a woman's dignity, not a girl's fear. My husband kept messaging. He sent insults, accusations, threats masked as warnings, demands disguised as advice. I responded with nothing. Every silence made him angrier. He even showed up at the edge of the driveway one evening, yelling from his car that I was making a fool of myself. I closed the blinds, turned off the lights, made tea. He left after 10 minutes. I didn't bother watching him go. On the morning of the court date, I stood in my bedroom staring at my reflection, not to admire myself, but to acknowledge myself. I saw strength where fear used to live, calm where panic used to breathe, clarity where confusion once tangled my thoughts. I slipped on a simple gold necklace, my father's final gift. It rested warm against my skin. My lawyer called just as I was heading out. "We're ready," she said. "Are you?" I picked up the box with the documents. "Yes," I whispered. But inside, my voice felt steadier than it had in years. "Let's finish this." The sky was cool and pale when I stepped outside, the air crisp with promise. Today wasn't about revenge. Today was about truth. And as I locked the door behind me, documents secured in my hand, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, powerful certainty. It was time. The courtroom awaited. The courtroom felt colder than the lawyer's office ever did, bigger, emptier, echoing with a kind of authority that made every breath feel heavier. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting thin, sharp beams across the polished wooden floor. It smelled faintly of old paper, ink, and something else. Justice waiting patiently. I walked in with my lawyer beside me, holding my box of documents like a shield. My steps were steady, slower than usual, but not from fear. No, fear had burned itself out somewhere between the will and the ownership transfer. This was something else, a quiet readiness, a calm that felt earned. And then they entered. My husband pushed through the double doors like a man walking into his coronation. Chin high, shoulders back, suit tailored too tightly across his chest, the arrogance practically dripping off him. The mistress strutted beside him, wearing heels too tall for a courthouse and a smirk too sharp for decency. She spotted me first, her lips curled. He followed her gaze, then chuckled under his breath. "Ah," he whispered loudly enough for the nearest bench to hear, "the soon-to-be homeless ex-wife." The mistress laughed behind her hand, faux delicate. "This shouldn't take long," she murmured to him, straightening his tie like she had any right. I watched them walk past and felt nothing. No heartbreak, no rage, just a hollow clarity, the kind that comes before truth detonates. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I kept my gaze forward, palms pressed against my skirt, spine straight. My husband, on the other hand, relaxed into his seat with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. The judge, a stern woman with silver streaks in her hair, leaned forward. "We are here today to review the dissolution of marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," she began. "Both parties have submitted initial documents. Mr. Thompson, your counsel may proceed." His lawyer stood. A tall man, smooth-talking, smug-eyed. He began listing assets as if he were reading off the man's personal grocery list. "The marital home," he said smoothly, "belongs solely to Mr. Thompson, as he was the primary earner. Mrs. Thompson has no claim." My husband nodded proudly. "The vehicles, investments, and savings accounts were all funded by Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson does not qualify for alimony due to lack of contribution." My husband smirked. "And finally," the lawyer concluded, "Mr. Thompson's business, Thompson Enterprises, should remain exclusively under Mr. Thompson's control." The mistress smiled so wide her cheekbones lifted. Then her eyes slid toward me, full of silent victory. The judge turned her head slightly. "Mrs. Thompson, do you dispute these claims?" My husband leaned forward, confident. "She knows she married up," he announced loudly. "Everything I have, I built. She came with nothing. She leaves with nothing." "That's how this works." The mistress giggled. A few people in the back row murmured, shifting uncomfortably. I inhaled slowly. My lawyer touched my hand gently. "It's time." The judge folded her hands. "Mrs. Thompson," she said calmly, "do you have anything to submit to this court?" And that was the moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. With steady hands, I rose, opened the box, and withdrew the prenup. "My father insisted on this," I said softly, lifting it for the court clerk. The judge adjusted her glasses. Then I placed the second document on top of it. "And this," I said, voice steady, strong now, "is my father's will." The courtroom shifted, subtle gasps, muffled whispers. My husband stiffened. The mistress leaned forward, eyes narrowing. His lawyer frowned. The judge accepted the documents and began reading. The room was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Her eyes traced the first lines, then widened. Her brows lifted, her lips pressed into a line. She glanced at me, then at my husband, then back at the papers. Finally, she cleared her throat. "It states here," she said slowly, "that all premarital assets belonging to Mrs. Thompson remain solely hers." My husband blinked. "What?" he whispered. The judge continued. "That includes inherited properties, land, all assets tied to her father's estate, and any investments made through her family name." The mistress turned toward him sharply. The judge flipped to the second page of the prenup. "And it is signed by both parties, notarized, legally binding." My husband swallowed hard. "Additionally," the judge continued, lifting the will, "Mr. Thompson has no legal claim to Mrs. Thompson's inherited wealth, investments, or estate. They were protected long before this marriage began. Whispers filled the room. The mistress clutched his arm. "What is she talking about?" she hissed. But the judge wasn't finished. She flipped to the last page, her voice taking on a tone even she didn't often use. And it further states that any marital property purchased or maintained with inherited funds, she paused, belongs solely to Mrs. Thompson. My husband's face drained of color. The mistress pulled her hand back like he'd burned her. The judge leaned forward. "In conclusion," she said sternly, "Mrs. Thompson retains ownership of all properties, accounts, land, and investments in question. Mr. Thompson is entitled to none of it." The mistress gasped. He choked out. "But that's impossible. She didn't—" "Mr. Thompson," the judge cut sharply, "be silent." He froze. The judge continued. "You will also be responsible for Mrs. Thompson's legal fees." A ripple of shock swept through the spectators. "Furthermore," she added, "due to Mrs. Thompson's clear financial independence and Mr. Thompson's demonstrated stability, no alimony will be granted to him." The mistress slapped her palm over her mouth. My husband tried again, voice cracking. "Your Honor, if I could just—" The judge held up a hand. "You have spoken enough, sir." He closed his mouth instantly, face bright red, hands shaking on the table. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, breathing evenly. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't look at him. Dignity is its own kind of victory. The judge finalized the ruling and dismissed the case. People rose around me, some whispering, some staring, some shaking their heads in disbelief. My husband didn't move. He just sat there, crushed in a way no cruelty of his could disguise. His mistress leaned away from him, whispering harshly, "You told me she had nothing." My lawyer touched my shoulder gently. "You did beautifully." I nodded once. Then I stood. I walked past my husband without a word, my steps quiet, steady, and sure. For the first time in 32 years. I felt free. And as the courtroom doors closed softly behind me, sunlight spilling over my face, I realized something. I wasn't walking away with nothing. I was walking away with everything he tried to take, and more. Quiet dignity, legacy, power. And the truth my father left behind like a final gift, the truth that saved me. The courthouse steps felt warm beneath my feet as I walked out, sunlight washing over me like a blessing I didn't know I needed. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy against my skin. I breathed deeper, stood taller. My lawyer walked beside me, quiet, respectful, letting me savor the moment. Behind me, my husband's world was cracking, but he didn't know yet just how deep the fractures went. He thought the humiliation was over. He thought the nightmare had ended in that courtroom, with him losing the house, the land, the inheritance he coveted. He had no idea. That was only Act 1. I was halfway down the stairs when my lawyer's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then at me. "Mrs. Thompson," she said softly, "we need to go back inside." My heart paused mid-beat. Did something happen? "There's one last document," she said, lowering her voice. "One the court didn't have the authority to open until after the divorce ruling." A chill rippled through me. "From your father," she added. The air shifted around me, like the world itself leaned closer. I nodded slowly. "Let's go." Back inside, my husband stood with his lawyer and mistress just a few feet away. He looked shaken, but still trying to hold his composure together like a suit that no longer fit. He saw me and scoffed. "What now?" he snapped. "Trying to drag out your little victory?" The mistress folded her arms, lips pursed. "This is ridiculous." My lawyer ignored them and approached the clerk's desk. The clerk opened a sealed envelope, older than the others. With handwriting I recognized instantly, my father's. The clerk cleared his throat. "This document was submitted with the will but marked to be read upon finalization of marriage dissolution. It pertains to ownership transfers." My husband frowned. "Ownership of what?" The clerk read the title, "Transfer of Controlling Interest, Thompson Enterprises." The color drained from my husband's face so suddenly it was like watching a candle blow out. He stepped forward. "What are you talking about? There is no controlling interest. My business is private, fully mine." The clerk held up a hand. "This document supersedes your current ownership filings." My hands trembled softly at my sides. My lawyer placed a grounding palm on my arm. The clerk continued. "Per Mr. Sir Harold Brooks' estate, all investment shares previously held by him in Thompson Enterprises, shares totaling 51%, are hereby transferred to his daughter, Mrs. Diane Thompson." Silence. Not quiet. not stunned. Complete, breathless silence. My husband's mouth opened and closed twice before sound finally came out. "No," he rasped. "No, that's impossible. He invested nothing. She didn't." My lawyer stepped forward calmly. "He invested 32 years ago when the business was just an idea you scribbled on paper. A few $1,000s. Small then, massive now." The mistress turned on him instantly. "You told me the business was all yours," she snapped, voice sharp as shattered glass. "You lied," he rounded on her. "How was I supposed to know her father kept ownership?" "He didn't tell me. He tricked me." "No," my lawyer said gently, firmly. "He protected his daughter. That's not the same." My husband's eyes darted wildly, panic spreading like wildfire. This can't be right," he stammered. "This is my life, my company, my work." The clerk read the final line. "Effective immediately, controlling interest, voting rights, and executive decision rights belong solely to Mrs. Thompson." His knees buckled so slightly only I noticed. The mistress definitely noticed the rest. She shoved him hard. "You idiot," she screamed. "You promised me everything. You said we'd live off the business. You said she was nothing." He reached for her, desperate. "Baby, listen, I can fix this." She pulled her arm away violently. "You can't fix anything. You don't own anything," she yelled. "Do you understand that? You lost everything." Her voice echoed off the courtroom walls. People turned. Some stared, some smirked. She glared at me next, eyes full of venom. "Congratulations," she hissed. "You ruined everything." I didn't answer, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her rage wasn't mine to carry. She stormed out, heels slamming against the floor, cursing him the entire way. My husband sank onto a bench, breathing hard, eyes unfocused. The man who once told me I was nothing now owned nothing. "Mrs. Thompson," the clerk said, handing me the packet, "you have full legal authority over the business now. You may choose its future." My husband's head snapped up. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Diane, please, you wouldn't take that from me." I looked at him fully then, not with anger, but with something far colder, clarity. For 32 years, I held us together. For 32 years, I supported his dreams. For 32 years, I believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And he rewarded that loyalty with insults, betrayal, and cruelty. He stood slowly and reached for me, voice cracking. "Please, don't do this. Don't destroy my life. I need that company." I held the papers to my chest. "You destroyed your own life," I said softly, "long before today." Tears filled his eyes, real ones, desperate ones. But I wasn't the woman he could sway anymore. Later that afternoon, my lawyer and I sat in her office to finalize everything. She handed me a pen. "With control of the company," she said gently, "you may run it, dissolve it, or transfer it as you see fit." I thought of my father, his hands warm over mine, his voice whispering wisdom I didn't yet understand. "Your future must always be yours," he told me once. "Even if someone tries to take it." I swallowed hard and signed the final document. The company was no longer my husband's lifeline. It wouldn't be mine either. "I want it donated," I said slowly. "All of it. To the scholarship foundation my father loved so much." My lawyer's eyes softened. "You're sure?" "Yes," I whispered. My father believed in helping people rise, not in funding the fall of a man who hurt me. She nodded. And with a final signature, 32 years of sacrifice ended. Not in bitterness, but in peace. When I stepped out of the lawyer's building for the last time, the late afternoon sun washed over me. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. Freedom tastes different when it's earned. Sweeter, cleaner, lighter. I walked down the steps without looking back, my shoulders lighter than they had been since my 20s. No house lost, no money taken, no future stolen, no chains left binding me to a man who tried so hard to break me. Because my father had made sure I'd always have a way forward, a way out, a way up. And as I walked toward my car, keys warm in my hand, I whispered the truth into the breeze. He called me worthless, but my father made sure I'd never depend on a man like him again. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.